Beis, Mishnah Dalet. The Mishnah says, Lo yikoiv odom shefayferes shel beitza. A person mustn't he mustn't make a hole in an eggshell, v'yimalena shemen, and fill it up with oil, v'yitnena al pihaner, and then place it on the mouth of a lamp, b'shvil shetei min tefes, so that it will drip constantly into this. Afilu shalcheres, even if it's shalcheres. V'ribihudad matir. So what are we talking about? We're talking about lamps of old. Now, to save oil in the old days, what they would do is they would have a sort of a two-piece structure. They would have a very sort of shallow dish with a base with a wick in it, and a minimum amount of oil in that dish just to keep the wick alight. But then they would have a second larger bowl which would contain oil, and it would slowly drip into this shallow basin which would contain the wick. And often this reservoir, this second keli, was made out of an eggshell, a hardened shell, with a small piercing in it, and the oil would drip out. So the Mishnah says, Lo yikoiv odom shefayferes shel beitza, a person must not pierce a hole in an eggshell, v'yimalena shemen, and fill it up with oil, v'yitnena al pihaner b'shvil shetei min tefes, and place it in sort of connecting, as it were, or above the base, so that the oil drips into it. Afilu shalcheres. Why not? The Chazal were worried that the guy will be mechaber. He'll see that it's two separate items, and he'll say to himself, I understand that there's an issue of mechaber, of extinguishing on Shabbos, but that's only when it's one piece. The wick is separate over here. It's in the base, the base dish at the bottom. The eggshell is not connected to it, and maybe I could take some of the oil out of it. Or the Tiferes Yisrael learns I can actually take the actual eggshell away. And what is the problem with that? That is the problem of kibui, of extinguishing, which is one of the Av Melachos. Tosfos learns that the problem of kibui is that if you take away some of the oil, you're going to reduce the intensity with which the flame burns, and that's called kibui. The Rosh learns that that's not the issue. The issue is, if you take away some of the oil, then it's going to extinguish sooner, and that's called kibui. The Tosfos argues and says that's gram kibui, that's not kibui, but either way, that's the machlokas. But the problem here is kibui. If you take away some of the oil, there's going to be a problem of extinguishing on Shabbos. So therefore, Chazal said that when you've got this two-piece makeshift lamp, you are not allowed to use the eggshell, because a person might take away and be over kibui. Afilu shalcheres, even if the item, this thing which is feeding into the little dish where the wick is, even if that reservoir is in a klicheres, you can't do it. Why? Says the Bar Tunura, va'afilu hishalcheres, says the Bar Tunura, demois, because a klicheres becomes disgusting, becomes mos, afilu hochi gazrinan. Still Chazal were worried that the guy might take away the klicheres with the oil. Why? Because he might think, shekiven she'en ha'psila ha'doilekes b'toicha kli sheyesh ba'hashemen, since it's two separate kelim, it's not one item, it's just sort of feeding into the keli. Osti listepuke minor, he might come and take some of that oil away. Desova ein kan mishum mechaber. He thinks this isn't the problem of mechaber, and he might be moira heads and say it's okay. So even though there's less likelihood of him doing that with the klicheres, which becomes which is mos, which is despicable to him, nonetheless Chazal were choishish for it. For Rabbi Yehuda matir, and Rabbi Yehuda said it's okay. Says the Bar Tanura, Deloy Gozar, he's not what the Chazal will not geyser dilma osidis tepukim, that he might come and take some of this oil. Shahari huroya Hashem noitif ala psila shetachtov, because an onlooker can see that the oil is dripping into this dish at the bottom of the wick, and he can see that this is mechaber, so no one is going to take it away. So Yehuda is matir. Continues the Mishnah. Avalim chibro hayoytze mitchila. If the yotze, which is the potter, the expert, if he joins the two together, i.e. the dish with the wick in at the bottom, and the bowl, the reservoir which is supplying oil into it, if he connects them together, it's got a din of one lamp, then it's mutter, because that's got a din of a kli echod, of a single keli, a single vessel, and we're not worried. Everyone is, if it's one kli, Chazal were not worried that a person is going to be over mechaber on Shabbos. The whole chashash at the beginning of the Mishnah is where it's two separate kelim, and there a person might not realize it's mechaber, and it'll take away the supplying reservoir of oil, which is a problem of mechaber. But if it's one kli, then it's mutter. And the Baratanura says it's lav dafka if it's a yoitzer who actually connects them. The Baratanura says even if it's a balabayas who connects them, it's a layman who collects them, that's okay. Continues the Mishnah. Lo yemale odom es ha'ka'oro shemen v'yitnena b'tzad haner. We're now describing a slightly different type of makeshift lamp, where a person has also got two parts to it, the dish with the wick in it, plus a larger bowl with oil. But here, the wick goes from one and goes out into the supplying reservoir of oil. And it's being saturated with oil. A person mustn't do that. He shouldn't put the unlit end of the wick into that reservoir. Lo yemale od misakar shemen v'yitnena b'tzad haner v'yiten rosh ha'pasila b'soicha b'shvil shetehei shoyeves, that there'll be like a constant source of oil going into it, for exactly the same reasons we mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah, i.e. Chazal were worried that if it's got two separate parts to it, a person might take away the supplying source of oil, and that is a problem of mechaber. Rabbi Yehuda is matir. Rabbi Yehuda over here says this is not a problem, because it's two distinct kelim. And if it's got a din of two distinct kelim, of two separate vessels, there is no fear that a person is going to take away the supplying source of oil, because people are aware of the issue of mechaber. So that is the machlokes Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. That is the end of Mishnah Dalet.